Hello, I'm Farrell, this is Tally, we are bored of it, and welcome to our review of the game I keep calling Ultimate Railroads. Now, time for a history lesson. The year is 2013, and a popular game called Russian Railroads is released. However, it goes out of print, and nobody can play it except for on BGA. And people are sad, and as a testament to its popularity, it is still in the top 100 on BGG. But worry not, because now you have Ultimate Railroads, the big box reprint for 1 to 4 players of Russian Railroads that includes all the good expansion stuff as well. So you have the Germany expansion, the American expansion, the brand new Asian expansion, and modular expansions. So, as Rihanna famously said, if trains and worker placement spaces excite you, this is the box for you.
But what is Ultimate Railroads? At its core, it's a tight, tense worker placement game where your goal is to build railroads across whichever region you're playing in. Due to the fact there are multiple routes in each region, players are given a fair amount of choice about how they tackle each game because you certainly can't do everything. This means that you'll focus on specific areas and strategies in the hopes of comboing out different bonuses and rewards to prepare yourself to big points income.
Ultimate Railroads is a pretty standard Euro-style worker placement game where the average turn is going to be spending workers to do an action. And often these actions will move things on your player board, and this will lead to rewards or bonus actions. And what players are trying to do is combo these together to get the most points. Now, it's going to last between 6 and 7 rounds, which will depend on player count. And a round consists of multiple turns, which players take in turn order. And a single turn will be players spending workers to do a worker placement action somewhere. Then, when all players have passed, usually because they're out of workers, the round will end.
The main goal of the game is to build rail, which you do by pushing these tokens up the tracks. When you reach certain spaces on the main track, you'll unlock better tracks. And the higher the level that you unlock, the more points you'll get for building that type. However, you have to build in order, as tracks of different levels can't leapfrog each other and they can't be on the same space. So you have to start by pushing up the beige track, then the green, the bronze, the silver, and finally the gold.
But you'll generally only score points for as far as your trains can reach. So in this example here, the green track is on space 2, but my train only reaches to space 1. So I'll only get 1 point, not 2 for that in scoring. And this means you're going to be upgrading trains so you can reach further throughout the game. Then at the bottom of the player board, you have this industrialization track, which you can take actions to move this French up. And you'll score points at the end of every round based on how far you've gone up. And if you move onto a space with a factory tile, you can take that factory action, although you have to build the factories first. Lastly, every round there is 1 engineer available to buy, and these engineers, when bought, essentially give a player a personalized action space just for them.
And honestly, that's mostly the core of the game, as most of the action comes from the fight over the worker placement spaces and comboing the different bonuses you get to get more VP. At the end of each round, you'll look at all of the routes on your player boards and score them based on a combination of how far your trains can go and how far you've moved up your tracks. You'll also get those industrialization points. There are some endgame scoring cards, but the only ever-present endgame scoring is some extra points for having the most engineers. We love Ultimate Railroads. We've played about 8 times so far to test out all of the content, and we're nowhere near tired of it. There are so many sharp little gameplay elements which are just so interesting and spicy. Firstly, it's an excellent example of the worker placement genre, because all of the spaces are equally as interesting and the fight over them is a rough one. Secondly, the crunch to minute of gameplay ratio is really second to none, and once you're familiar with the game, you can usually get them down in sub 1 hour.
And talking of these spicy gameplay elements, one example, and probably one of our favourites, are the coins. These are essentially act as a worker, and you can just use them on space like worker, except you lose them at the end of the round. They don't come back to you like a worker would. And what's particularly interesting is that certain spaces require you to use a coin if you want to do that action, such as buying an engineer. And what this does is, first of all, you want to kind of use the coins maybe when you're in a pinch, when you need one more worker to do something important. But you're also pulled in the other direction of wanting to save them for these special spaces, often of which are powerful actions. And Ultimate Railroads is just full of these little gameplay elements that really electrify the game.
So, as we just alluded to, the key gameplay element, which for us makes this game great, is choice. What this game really excels at is making every worker placement space one that you want to go to, every idea token one that you want to pick, etc. So you're constantly making tough decisions about which options to pick. And you know, whichever options you don't pick, your opponent likely will. Also, when the other players do take spaces that you wanted, the other spaces are equally as interesting and you're still going to be moving forward in some way. So you never feel like you're taking wasted actions as you might in other worker placement games.
Yeah. And just as an example of what we mean, these dilemmas, if you're the first player in a round, you pretty much have a brutal decision. At least for us, there are always 3 spaces you want to go to, and you want to go to all of them equally. And, you know, first you have the engineer space because it gives you an engineer, you get a private action, and it counts for in-game scoring. You have the money space, which gives you coins, which then means you have more workers than you did before you went there. So that lets you do more that round. And lastly, the space that lets you move your wooden tracks, because this is really how things happen and you get bonuses. Honestly, you want to do all of them, and every round of every game, the choice is brutal, and we absolutely love it.
Lastly, this game is just so well balanced. You cannot do everything, and you certainly don't want to half-arse multiple routes. Thus, you have to pick a strategy and follow through with it. But the game does provide multiple ways to play on the different maps, which are all fun to explore and should result in similar levels of VP if played correctly. The core gameplay system is wonderfully designed, and what this box excels at is throwing in new gameplay wrinkles and little side mechanisms to explore, which build upon this core to provide constant engagement and incredible replayability.
So now I'm going to talk about the one element of this game that I absolutely loathe. And I know that people will be like, oh, it doesn't bother me that much, or oh, it's easily avoidable, but I'm the one reviewing the game, so shut up. Basically, there's one endgame scoring element that occurs in every single game, and that is who has the most engineers. It's worth a lot of points, it can easily decide the game, but one of the issues is that often players can easily tie for having the same number of engineers, particularly in a 2-player game. So then how do you decide this? Who gets the points? Oh, well, there's an arbitrary number written on the engineers, and whoever has the highest arbitrary number wins. And I'm sorry, but this is absolute bullshit. Because first, the number has no effect on gameplay. Second, depending where you're sat around the table, it can be tough to even see the numbers. You might not notice it's there. And third, even if you're trying your hardest to get the highest value engineer, it can be almost impossible to do just due to the chaotic nature of the turn order. And what I hate and think is unforgivable is that this is such a knife fight in a phone box of a game. It's so tight and tense, and it can be won or lost now basically on somebody drawing lots. Moving on to something more general that people should be aware of is that Ultimate Railroads can be a demoralizing game. It's not for people who can't take knowing that they've lost with 2 rounds left to play in the game. Now, the scoring in Ultimate Railroads is nearly exponential because every round you're going to improve your lot quite a bit compared to what you were doing the previous round. So the first round you might score 2 points, last round you might score 120 points. And the problem here comes either when, say, your opponent plays an absolute blinder and they just nail everything they do, or maybe you make a slight misjudgment and it costs you a little bit. And then the problem is you do the scoring, and you go over here, and then your opponent goes here. And now there's this gulf, and you know at minimum they're going to get at least as many points as they just got this round, but probably a lot more. And you have this space to catch up. And sometimes it's just not going to happen, and it can be really hard to hold your head up and kind of keep focused on the game when this is the case. Now, from our part, we love this game, and this doesn't bother us at all. It's part of the meanness of the game, it's part of the charm. But we're saying this because there's obviously people who aren't going to like this type of game, this style of scoring, and this game will not be their cup of tea.
In a similar vein, we do worry this is quite a hard game to introduce to new players when the other players at the table have a few more games under their belt. Because of the aforementioned scoring and the obvious lack of knowledge regarding the optimal moves, we can see new players getting kind of frustrated with this pretty quickly. It takes a few games to really get up to speed, and up until then, it might not be that much fun if those players are scoring a couple of 100 points underneath the more experienced players. So, as we said at the beginning, Ultimate Railroads comes with several different versions to play. Because we are quite clearly very professional reviewers, we have played through all of the content so we can tell you all about it. First up is Russian Railroads, and this is the golden child, the original, the classic, and is essentially the most streamlined and simple, yet is still excellent. German Railroads is also great, and the highlight being that you can essentially build your own railroad, i.e. you can choose the specific rewards you get on the different lines rather than them all being pre-printed, and the decision about what to go for is an interesting one. American Railroads is where things get a little bit more complicated. Here you have stocks, which is a track you can move down to get various rewards, and occasionally the rewards you already have gained will pay out. There's also a new industry board, which gives you the option of moving down 2 tracks, with one of them allowing you to forgo the factory spaces and the actions that come with them to get points faster. American Railroads does feel like one that maybe will take a little bit of practice to get good at. Asian Railroads is a completely new map and is arguably the most complicated. Definitely one for Russian Railroads professionals. You've got a ton of stuff going on each route, which requires new strategies. And there's even a whoppingly long route, which requires 3 trains to reach the end. There's also a new shared industry board with the first player who places a factory tile getting a bonus action and getting to choose that factory tile. Plus, they get to do that action once more at their leisure once they've moved through that space. Thus, it can be a pretty tense race if multiple players are going for industry.
Then you have the modules, and first is the coal module, introduces coal as a new resource, and you can grab action spaces which you have to pay to use with coal, or you can get boilermen and you add them to trains to make them longer, or factories to do more factory stuff. Next is what we've termed the whistle expansion, because the real name's really boring and we can't remember it, and all the cards have whistles on them. And partially this is extra stuff, so new engineers, new idea cards, etc. But the main part is a new action space, which kind of represents a moving train, and the rewards that you get for going there will change when someone takes it. But when someone takes it, other players also get like one of the rewards. And both of these were fine. I think one of the issues is we only tried it with 2, and it's a bit binary because if one player does it, the other player doesn't do it, so it's not that fun to engage with. And what we really didn't like is that if you use either of these, you play with 1 less round, and we didn't feel that what they added made up for losing that round, because the game wasn't as fun when we didn't have that round. And maybe getting better with these modules will kind of negate that feeling, but we didn't see it immediately. It's like the coal module. Some of the coal actions are like the same as the main board, but you have to spend a worker to actually get coal to then use them. It's just a bit like, why didn't you just go to that space initially?
So, final thoughts. Ultimate Railroads is truly a wonderful box. It's packed to the brim with content, and not a single second of gameplay goes by where it isn't providing players with interesting decisions. It's also an excellent example of the worker placement genre, and it's also a very rewarding experience due to how smart it makes you feel when you take an action that triggers a rewards cascade and gets you more actions and victory points.
However, it is a tough, tight game that won't be to everyone's taste. And because of the way scoring works, a small mistake on your part can exponentially cascade to the point where you're last place, you have no recourse, you're never going to win, and there's still 2 rounds left to play. But the bottom line is that if this game sounds like it's for you, we fully recommend it. We really enjoyed playing it, but you have to be okay with the price tag. And that said, it's only worth the price tag if you're going to give this game time to explore all of the components. If you're going to play it a few times and move on to the next thing, then it's not worth investing in. So that was our review of, nearly said Imperial Steam, Ultimate Railroads.
Trains.
So many train games lately. Ultimate Railroads. And we hope you enjoyed it. We hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, ask us. And please, if it was helpful, subscribe. And we hope you enjoyed watching, and thank you for watching. See you next time.